First, I would like to give a very big personal thank you to the Torah Umesorah organization under the leadership of our Gedolim and Tzvi Blum for really being the first national moisid to be willing to address the issue of sexual abuse, molestation, addiction, and give a platform for it, both in the public setting, at its conferences and events, and more importantly, in the practical private setting of helping with plenty of initiatives and programs. So a big thank you to Torah Umesorah for hosting us, not just here today, but for really being there at the forefront along with all of us, with Relief, with Amudim, and opening up Project Lishmor. Many people forget that Torah Umesorah is not new to this. Counterforce has been around for many, many years, another Torah Umesorah initiative, so we really need to recognize the great work that's being done. But I want to try to focus a little bit on the positive of how far we've actually come. And as Mendy said it so eloquently, we still have a long way to go. We're not going to minimize that. But 4 years ago, you couldn't get up at a public event and talk about child sexual abuse. It was still too taboo. The Novominsker Rebbe got up at the Torah Umesorah National Convention a few years ago and very publicly spoke about child molestation and gave a cry that everybody that was there heard, and it's been recorded, that we as a community must do more to help those that are victims and the families that are suffering from this. And this is a testament that really has to go to those that were there for the many years trying to break these barriers step by step. Many years ago, we couldn't talk about mental illness. It was taboo. Rabbi Babad, Sandy Orenstein, and a few other very brave people formed relief resources and worked very heavily to break the taboo regarding issues of mental illness. And I'm going to say these words carefully. Baruch Hashem, today, there are thousands upon thousands of people that are calling them for help. And there are thousands of people that are calling us for help and many other organizations. And the reason why I say Baruch Hashem is because it's a sign that people are reaching out. So while it's very sad that all these problems exist, but we have to look at the fact that as a community, Klal Yisrael does continuously band together for the issues that are so near and dear to our heart, and do what needs to be done to help. Just to give you a little perspective to add on to what Rabbi Babad said, how when we were talking about the topic, we were talking about abuse, addiction, mental illness, and suicidality, because all too often we see the numbers glaring at us and we see how they all link to each other. Unfortunately, this year alone, 2017, since the beginning of the year, January 1st, under the age of 35, Klal Yisrael has lost 180 precious souls to overdose and alcohol-related deaths. Now, I only mention under the age 35 because I've been warned not to talk about the 49-year-old balabas in shul that had a sudden aneurysm because of children in shidduchim. So we're keeping our numbers to under 35. But sadly, those numbers are more than double if we include those that were older than 35, but because of the word, the dirty word that blocks us from getting so many people help, the word shidduch, we can't talk about it. Of those 180, we have confirmation that 144 were victims of child sexual abuse. That is approximately 80%. And this is only a data pool that we know about because these are people that either we dealt with when they were alive or dealt with the family dealing with the trauma after they passed away, and we're able to confirm that, which means the numbers are certainly higher. We also have data of the same time period of 35 suicides that were straight suicides, not drug and alcohol related. And again, the bulk of them were victims of child sexual abuse. But at the same time, we can look at the other side of the coin. We're currently at Amudim fielding over 240 calls a day. And many people look at us, and I know that Rabbi Babad gets this as well, and say, oh, I guess it's not really working because so many people are calling. So we continue to reiterate and say, no, that means it's actually working great because people are calling. We had a very bittersweet call in the office a couple of weeks ago where a Hasidic woman who only spoke Yiddish reached out to us for help about the fact that she found out that her brother-in-law was molesting her daughter. It was the victim's uncle. And as we started getting her the help, I called the staff that was in the office at the time and I said, you have to look at the positive of this, as hard as this sounds. She called for help. That's a huge step. As a community, we have historically been pushing back at this. So while Baruch Hashem, we're doing a great job, we need to continue to do more. Yes, the numbers are steadily increasing. Over the last 3 years, we went from 800 cases a year to over 1,700 cases a year. But again, it's people reaching out for help. So now we have to focus on the moving forward. So being that we're at the Torah Umesorah convention and we really wanted to bring this into the school systems, so let's remember a couple of things. First of all, our children spend most of their time in the school setting, in the yeshivas, meistes HaKodesh, meistes HaChinuch. And therefore, it is incumbent upon the schools, which are already doing a very good job at starting to deal with this, to do more. We need to make sure that we can help the schools have better education, prevention, early detection, and know how to deal with the issues. Now, we don't want schools to become experts in this. We know that Torah Umesorah, under the leadership of Isaac Perlstein and Davi Morgenstern, have developed the Mashgiach program. Phenomenal program, which is definitely a great first step in combating sexual abuse and mental illness amongst our children. That's one step. We know that Torah Umesorah is now working with Rabbi Zev Donner, who you'll hear from in a few minutes, on Project Lishmor, taking that to the next level, focusing on school-based education. But let me give you this scenario. If somebody were to say that you take an average school, 2 classes per grade, 1st through 8th grade, 25 kids in a class, and somebody said that there would be guaranteed asbestos poisoning in 1 child per class over the full 8 years, and that child would either end up very sick or dead, I can guarantee you the parent body would revolt, the school board would get together, and they would either move to another building, get asbestos removal, or do whatever it takes to make sure that those kids are safe. Sadly, the statistics of children being molested and turning to drugs are more than 1 in 25 in our community. How can we sit by and not take that same approach? What right do we have to not fight for this? We need to make sure that the schools are also going to allow additional programming to enter. Now, there's currently an initiative that I'm pleased to announce today that is being done in conjunction with many organizations involved, both in the educational world, mental health world, and is going to be spearheaded as well by Rabbi Donner, which is helping to build a curriculum through 12th grade, which is going to address aspects of healthy living. It's going to be age and grade appropriate, gender segregated, and frum friendly. The concept is going to be helping with matters such as feelings, bullying, healthy decision making, personal safety, respect issues. A lot of the things that we have known will help with the prevention program. I know a few weeks ago I had a conversation, on Sukkot I had a conversation with Avi Shron, who I called him a few nights ago, very late at night, and I said, I need you to send me an email from that book that we spoke about over Sukkot, which had a study that said the difference between school-based programs that are single-focused just on sexual abuse versus curriculum school-based programs that are focused on the full emotional well-being of the student. There's a 10-to-1 ratio of students that have a full, healthy educational experience and learn about how to be healthy in living, emotional well-being. That 10-to-1 were more likely to report abuse, even within the family, which is most of the cases that we deal with. Now, of course, whatever programs the schools are currently using are amazing, and we need to encourage them to continue doing so. And as I say many times, my goal is to be put out of business, and with the appropriate school-based education programs, that is the only way that Amudim can close down, other than lack of funds, which we hope won't happen. We also have to remember that because the schools are the first line of defense, what happens when a school does find out that chas v'shalom a student was molested, or that a student is using drugs or drinking alcohol? What is the response that the schools are implementing? How are they dealing with those? Unfortunately, not very well. I said something in the summer that got me into trouble, which means, of course, I'm going to have to say it again. But at this time, I can at least quote that Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, Rav Eliyashiv Zatzal, and Rav Pam Zatzal had said it, which I only found out after my statement, because people called to give me chizuk. And the quote was, if a school throws a student out without making sure there's an appropriate place for that child to go to, the school is committing murder of that student. This is no longer just Gluck's quote. This is coming from Gedolim that have said this long before me. There are amazing programs out there that schools can send students to if they do find that they cannot be in their environment, but to do so in a respectful manner. We've been doing a lot of work in getting schools to allow random drug testing and random testing to find out if the students are using alcohol, or now with the new drugs that are being used in vapes, which are hard to know the difference between vaping, tobacco, or drugs. And overwhelmingly, most of the schools say, we're never going to allow that. If we allow that, that means we have a problem. But the reality is we do have a problem. And the reality is there's not a single yeshiva high school that I know about that can say they have zero drugs or alcohol in it. And that's just a reality. We're servicing over 600 students that are high school age that have addiction issues, one form or another, ranging from gambling, sex addiction, porn addiction, alcohol, drugs. This is the sad reality of the world we're living in. But we need the schools to be our working partners, or to continue to be our working partners, to make sure that we can continue to provide this service, to be able to help those that need it. One of the things that we're encouraging schools to do now is to set up a drug policy that if they find a student that comes up positive, instead of throwing the student out, help find the student help. Get the student into a program, get them the treatment they need. Let's not forget, most of the people that are using drugs, abusing alcohol, or acting out in those ways were victims of trauma, some sort of sexual abuse or otherwise. So why do we want to re-victimize them again by throwing them out and guaranteeing them a life of misery? I don't remember which gadol it was, and I think Sholi told me the story, but if I'm almost positive, we'll figure that out later, that a principal went to a Rav to say, I want to throw this student out of yeshiva, and the Rav asked the principal, what's the student's mother's name? And the principal said, I don't know. And the Rav said, you mean to tell me you haven't been davening for this student and you're ready to throw them out? It was Rav Shach. Thank you, Yoey. That is what we have to figure out how to do. We need to make sure that the schools are a safe place for our children. There's a lot of new initiatives that are being embarked on. I've met a wonderful couple here that's working on another program that's going to hopefully put Amudim out of business, and I hope to help them through that as well. There's a lot that needs to be done. The schools are the front line. We, the parents, the educators, the donors, the board members, have the ability to force our schools to make those changes. We also have to talk for a moment about how far we've progressed in reference to the awareness of child sexual abuse. While we're seeing a huge increase of those reaching out for help, what we're not seeing is a huge increase in us as a community providing the emotional support. Of course, financial as well, but for sure emotional for the victims of abuse and their families. And until we as a community can say safely to victims of abuse, we are here for you, we're going to stand by you, it makes it that much more difficult. We need to help them heal to become productive members of society. That's what's important. And we cannot allow the victims to be re-victimized, to have secondary trauma because of trying to cover up cases to try to hush up cases, or to try to push the victims into a spotlight and turn them into the bad people. These are things that we can't do. And I want to end on one final note, and I'm echoing what Rabbi Babad said because this is extremely, extremely important. There is not a day that goes by that we don't receive a minimum of 20 phone calls just asking if we can help financially pay for treatment programs, both for victims of abuse to go to post-trauma programs or for people that are addicts. And when we try to ascertain and speak to the actual client or the family and figure out, do they really need to go to the programs they want to raise all this money for? Why are they choosing these programs? What research has been done? We're unfortunately seeing all too often that it's really not much. People run to the internet, they use Google to figure out the best treatment, they don't go through professionals, they don't call professional organizations such as Amudim or Relief or so many others. And they end up spending hundreds of thousands of dollars unnecessarily. And I hate to say this, but unfortunately, Amudim is not a bank. I wish we can afford to just write a check to every person that ever came to us for any ailment they had. But there's also an achrayus on the tzibur to make sure that there's accountability. Every time there's another article published where I'm quoted about talking about a death or an overdose, I can't tell you how many people in the community call me up and say, Tzvi, okay, it's great, I want to open up a rehab, I see it's a good business, people in our community need it, help me set that up. I'd love to see those same people call me up and say, hey Tzvi, I realize how tough this problem is, what can I do to help? But it has become a scary revolving door business. And as Rabbi Babad said, without people knowing what to look for, or knowing the true research of which programs are good. And by the way, just because a program is good doesn't mean it's good for that client. You know, I pride myself in the case managers that we have at Amudim that really do the most amazing job in the world, and very much selflessly, because I can promise you they don't do it for the money. Baruch Hashem, we have two of our case managers here with us from New York, Jill and Susie, and you'll hear from Donnie soon, who's running the program in Eretz Yisrael. But I pride myself on the fact that we do the research, we look into the core issue. Why is this person using? What was the underlying concern? What program is going to be best beneficial for them? And we try to make a decision in a healthy fashion to get them the help that they need. So while I very much look forward to being put out of business by programs such as Project Lishmor, Torah Umesorah, and these new initiatives that we're doing, I think we're going to have to be here for at least a short while to try to help those that can. We have to continue doing our job, fighting the good fight, hopefully with the support of all of you here, to make sure that we can continue doing this, helping one person at a time, saving one family at a time, saving one life at a time, and give these poor souls a reason to live, a reason to thrive, and a reason to want to get up the next day. Thank you very much. And now I'd like to invite Rabbi Zev Dunner from Torah Umesorah's Project Lishmor.